Well, was it easy to cut off those extra few minutes before?
It is relatively easy to go ahead and trim it out. So
Oh, okay. I'm surprised it's working today. That's nice. Okay, so is it doing anything?
Yes, that's just showing that we're live.
Oh, okay. Matt, can you hear me okay?
Hey, Jerry, I just got the class set up. I'm heading back to my office right now. It'll be 1 minute.
Sounds good.
All right.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll be getting started in about 1 minute.
All right, Jerry, can you see the presentation?
Yep, it looks good on this end, so feel free to take it away.
All right, guys, welcome to the April 2023 edition of the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective on Drought and Hydrologic Conditions. I hope everyone made it through the severe weather all right yesterday. It seems like it's been one event after another, but luckily, the next week or two maybe doesn't look like much in the way of severe weather. The pattern is actually changing, and we got some bridging high pressure heading our way, which should calm things down. So just the general information. The webinar series is presented by the Kentucky Climate Center at WKU in partnership with the National Integrated Drought Information System, NIDIS, and in coordination with the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. Production delivery reflects the contributions of many folks on this webinar, including Dr. Brodsky down there at WKU and the Kentucky Climate Center and the Mesnet, and Chip Zimmer with the Division of Water. Our next scheduled webinar is going to be May 4th. May the fourth be with you. Had to throw in that Star Wars reference, but same time, 2 p.m. I guess I do need to change that to Eastern Daylight Time, 1 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So this is being recorded, and I believe we're live on YouTube right now. Just to start out, this image right here was taken from the Boone County Kentucky Mesnet station up there in northern Kentucky. This was taken yesterday afternoon as that line of storms was moving through the area. I believe for most of the state, it was a non-event in terms of severe weather, but there were some folks, I'll go ahead to the next slide, like Louisville, where there were some tornadoes touched down. These are a look at the potential damage surveys for today from the National Weather Service in Louisville. They've already looked at some of the damage in Jefferson County, and they're seeing at least EF1 type damage over that way. Just a little bit of a tidbit on that. After a tornado moves through, a station isn't going to withstand the powerful winds from a tornado moving through an area. And more times than not, you're not going to have a weather station where that tornado hits anyways. So after the fact, the National Weather Service goes out and they look at 28 different damage indicators. Those damage indicators could be single family residential houses. They could be apartment complexes. They could be hospitals. They could be softwood or hardwood trees. And based on the degree of damage to those buildings or trees, they will assign a EF rating, the enhanced Fujita scale. It goes from an EF0 to an EF5, EF5 being the strongest. And right now here in Jefferson, they're looking at EF1 damage, typically for those single family households that might be part of the roof torn off. But I will say, looking at the image below might be a little eye-opening, but this isn't in Kentucky, but I thought I'd put it on here. This is from my cousin's farm in southeastern Illinois that he works for, a little town called Palestine, Illinois. And they had this was surveyed as an EF1 tornado, an upper end EF1 tornado by the National Weather Service in Lincoln, Illinois. But we're guessing that's a semi, unloaded 30,000 plus pounds. So that just shows you can see the cultivator disc under it. Another semi over to the left, flipped over. They're going to have to get some equipment for planting season moving forward, and John Deere's helping them out there, so that's good. But I want to put this picture on here just to show you the power of a tornado. Now, this is an EF1 tornado, so it did a lot of damage, but based on that EF scale, this is considered a fairly weak tornado. And this, I'll put in quotations, fairly weak tornado can do this kind of damage. It's eye-opening. So we've had plenty of severe weather events this past month. We are actually going to be getting into peak severe weather season here over the next 3 months. So please, please, please determine where your safe shelter is. If you're under a tornado warning, a severe thunderstorm warning, go to that safe shelter. You never know when that next time it could hit your house, your farm, you name it. Determine how you're going to get warning, whether that's a NOAA weather radio. By the way, I suggest everyone gets a NOAA weather radio. Those things will wake you up in the middle of the night if you're under a tornado warning or any other type of warning. Do you have any cell phone apps? Your TV meteorologists have multiple ways to get warning going forward. This has been a very active year, not only here in Kentucky, but across the eastern half of the United States. There was an EF4 down in Mississippi a couple weeks ago. There were several very strong tornadoes just a week ago on this same day, March 31st, out in Iowa, Illinois, and down near Memphis and Little Rock. So we got to be prepared, as I've been mentioning to everybody this year. I mean, it's not a matter of if we see another one of these major severe weather events, it's winds. So, but again, next 2 weeks looking pretty good here in Kentucky. Outline, we'll go over what happened this past month of March. Take a real quick look back at the months leading up to March, impacts in agriculture, outlooks moving forward, and then a quick questions and discussion session. So looking back the past 2 weeks, this is valid. If I can move this real quick on the top of my screen, I'll move it down here. This is valid for the period March 22nd to April 4th. So this does not take into account the rainfall we saw yesterday. Yesterday wasn't a downpour in terms of accumulations. Yes, we saw some heavy rain here and there, but accumulations weren't too impressive across the state. But past 2 weeks, most of the state in that light green, dark green color, 2 to 4 inches, which is above normal over that 2 week time span. The state averaged 3.25 inches over this 2 week period, which is just over an inch above normal. So going into planting season, this is going to have some impact, but we'll look a little more at that moving forward. 30 days. Time period March 6th to April 4th. We're looking at anywhere from 4 or 5 inches across the state, 2 to 3 across eastern Kentucky. They were actually well below normal over this 30-day period. Again, what I will mention, this does not include that March 3rd event where we saw a decent amount of rainfall. That was the event where we saw a lot of wind damage across the state with 70, 80 mile per hour winds at times. But past 30 days, 3.98 inch average, which is about a half inch below normal over that time span. But again, you add in the March 3rd event and we're above normal once again. Going back the past 60 days into early February, 10 to 15 inches in that tan area across much of western and central Kentucky. Those numbers do decrease as you get into the bluegrass region into eastern Kentucky, but 9.47 inch average across the state, about 0.8 of an inch above normal. So even with those lower accumulations across the bluegrass and eastern Kentucky, they're not too far away from normal for this time period. Going back 90 days, this is going to January 5th. Now, going back to 2022, we ended the year with 4 straight months of below normal rainfall, major drought conditions across the area. The rainfall started picking up in December, but really started picking up as we got into the month of January. And portions of western Kentucky that saw some of the worst impacts from that drought of 2022. It's quite a few areas in that 12, 13, 14, 15 plus inch range over there, even some red color in the purchase area of western Kentucky and upwards of 15 inches. So quite a bit of rainfall over the past 3 months. It's definitely what we want to see as we head into planting season 2023. Looking at the departure from normal precipitation over the past 30, 60, and 90 days, past 30 days, we're running close to normal across much of the area. What I will point out as we go to the 60-day period, which will also take into account that March 3rd event, most of these heavy rainfall events we saw in March, the heaviest accumulations, the highest rainfall totals were located close to the Ohio River. And you can really see those deviations in the 60-day departure from normal precipitation. There's some folks out there in the purchase area that are 4 to 6 plus inches above normal over this time period. And you can see those light blue colors, the dark green shades, they stay with those areas very close to the Ohio River as you go up into the northern bluegrass. But Other than that, even Eastern Kentucky is showing above normal accumulations. And of course, 90 days, as I was saying, it's been a wet start to the year, and we're seeing those above normal accumulations across the state. If we just look at March as a whole, the preliminary data from the Midwestern Regional Climate Center, they're showing we average 4.92 inches of precipitation in March, which is about a third of an inch above normal. So some folks saw much more, again, across Western Kentucky and up into the Bluegrass, but the state as a whole, we're pretty close to where we should be for the month of March. So moving forward, look at temperatures. The official data came out, I think it was pretty close to the March webinar that Dr. Brodsky gave. But I can't remember if the official data was out by the time we had this webinar on Thursday, but this is the official data for winter. And this is a look at the top 10 warmest winters on record. And 5 of the top 10 warmest years on record have occurred in the past decade or so. I highlighted those in red. 2022, 2023, December through February ranks as the second warmest winter on record here in the state of Kentucky. And again, this data goes back to 1895. So 125 plus years in this data record. And we just saw our second warmest winter on record. Now you see number 3 there, that was 2016, 2017. I've been talking to quite a few folks across the university here. It's been kind of odd because 2022, 2023, our winter this past year, it looks eerily similar to what we saw in 16, 17. We had a very warm months of January and February, and that was actually followed by a cold air outbreak in the middle of March, both of those winter seasons, or I should say spring season, as we get into the month of March. But looking at the month of March, we had our fair share of ups and downs. At the end of the day, average temperature, the departure from mean is over there on the right. Most of the state saw near to above normal temperatures. This was our 3rd straight month of above normal temperatures here in Kentucky. But again, we saw our fair shares of ups and downs. So talking about the downs, we had an exceptionally cold week there in the middle of March. March 20th is the first day of spring here in the state of Kentucky. And we had temperatures in the teens across most of the state, pretty close to Purdue's 3-point percentage in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Yes, I'm a Purdue grad. It was horrible to see. But anyways, this had some impacts on ag. I'm going to talk about that here in a second. But mostly, I think we got through this all right. So air temperature maximum. We go to the other side of the spectrum. This happened yesterday. These are the maximum air temperatures on the day. And some folks out in Eastern Kentucky got to 90 degrees. I'm going to pronounce this wrong. And I'm sorry if you live in that county. I think it's Owsley County. Out in Eastern Kentucky hit 90 degrees, which is crazy for this time of year. Our normal highs here in the start of April, we're only supposed to be in the 60s. So having a high temperature of 90 is very significant. So, but other than that, I mean, we were in the 80s across much of the rest of Kentucky in the low to mid 80s. I know it got toasty. I mean, my class is actually watching this webinar right now. And they came to class on Tuesday, another warm day, and they were talking about the how hot it was outside. And yes, it was warm, but dew points were up that day. So there was a taste of summer humidity in the air, and we don't typically see that here in early April. Moving on to the U.S. Drought Monitor. No, this is not the first week of April. This is back on January 3rd, 2023. Looking here in the state of Kentucky, we were doing fairly good. We're still trying to get rid of some of those abnormally dry conditions in Western Kentucky there. But you can see most of Indiana, Ohio, the Western Corn Belt there. seeing moderate to severe drought, and even out in west in the far west, California, big portion of California still in a extreme drought at that time. But let's fast forward to where we are now, April 4th. A lot of this drought from January 3rd was erased. So especially out there in the far west, you had these atmospheric rivers set up, a ton of flooding. Again, they have been seeing drought conditions for years on end, and now they're seeing the exact opposite end of the spectrum now out there in California and much of the western half of the United States at that. But here in the Ohio Valley, all that moderate drought up in Indiana and Ohio is gone. We are looking absolutely fine here in the state of Kentucky. Definitely what we want to see as we head into spring planting this year. Yes, there is some drought hanging on out there in the western corn belt right now, but here in the Ohio Valley as a whole, we're looking pretty solid. Looking at soil moisture and stream flows across the state, I pulled the maps over on the right from the USDA looking at topsoil moisture based on the latest crop report that came out. You know, this time back in November, October, we were looking at these maps, but looking at the bottom image, percent short to very short. And now we can look at the topsoil moisture percent surplus, and we're looking all right here in the state of Kentucky, 24% surplus. Up in Illinois, Indiana, they're probably going to have a harder time with spring planting moving forward over there in Ohio. But in the good news, you always want to look at the map at the bottom there. Only 2% of Kentucky topsoil is rated percent short to very short. So exact opposite to where we were back in October, November, so on and so forth. Looking at stream flows across the state, most of the state in that near normal to above normal stream flow categories in the light blue and green shades there. We're comparing this to where we should be at this time of the year. So we're in a good spot across the state. Plenty of rainfall adding to those stream flows. So severe weather, again, it's been a very active month, past month in the state of Kentucky. This is the last 30 days. So again, this does not include the March 3rd event. Jerry, I can only imagine if we added March 3rd, we may not be able to see the county boundaries on this map. But even outside that March 3rd event, a ton of non-thunderstorm wind damage across the state. All those tan blocks throughout there. Other than that, I mean, not a whole lot of anything else. Again, March 3rd, we did have some flooding along the Ohio River counties from western Kentucky up into the bluegrass, but predominantly it's been the wind here in Kentucky the past month, or even to start the year. This is a look at that March 3rd high wind event. We had a extremely strong low pressure center move just north of the state of Kentucky. How strong? We were breaking the all-time low pressure records for several stations across the state. Paducah down there in the right-hand corner dropped to a minimum pressure of 977.7 millibars. The previous all-time record was 981. Evansville got down to 976 there in southern Indiana. Previous record was 979.7. Now you get these low pressure systems move through the area, extremely strong low pressure systems at that, and you're going to have some very windy conditions. And talking to some folks in the weather profession, I mean, you probably got to go back to the remnants of Hurricane Ike moving through the area, September of 2008, I believe, to get any winds that were close to this. And I should say non-thunderstorm related winds or gradient winds. The map there at the top shows the peak wind gusts from the Kentucky Mesonet, what they measured from this event. And there was a lot of folks that saw anywhere from 60 to 80 mile per hour winds during this event. And as everyone is very well aware, this led to a lot. I was going to say quite a few, but over 500,000 customers without power across the state of Kentucky at its peak. So, round of applause to the linemen across the state of Kentucky and to those linemen that came into the state from the surrounding area. They had a lot of work to do on their hands, and yes, there were folks without power for days, but that's a lot better where it could have been. So, but over 500,000 customers without power, an unreal event. I drove home from Lexington after work that day after monitoring the weather, and you don't see something like this all the time. Trees down across one of our major roads here in Lexington, New Circle, and there were trees on top of cars. I saw light poles come down on top of cars. Extreme damage to the farming community, barns down, you name it. So hopefully we don't see anything like this again anytime soon. Now, Jerry went over this last month a little bit. Now, I'm just showing some updated graphs here. This is a look at the accumulation of wind advisories that are put out by each National Weather Service office across the state. This first one looks at Louisville, and you see the number of wind advisories put out by this Weather Service office throughout the year. We are leading the way going back to 2005. In 2023, the National Weather Service in Louisville has already issued 13 wind advisories. So if you think it's been a windy year here in the state of Kentucky or central Kentucky based on this graph, you are exactly right. And just to, put this in perspective, look where we are in 2023, 13. Going back to 2005, there's only 3 years on here that would match, and these are the entire years, would match the amount of wind advisories we've seen through early April right now in 2019, 18, 2008. Let's change it to Paducah. And Paducah, they're up there at 12 wind advisories. So they've matched going back to 2006, I believe it is on this graph, the most wind advisories they've ever issued in a year's time, and they matched it in early April. Going to Jackson out in eastern Kentucky, less. They're at 8 out there in Jackson. There's something wrong with the data here for 2008. We aren't seeing a half of a wind advisory or whatnot. So I was going to send that into the Iowa Environmental Mesonet after this presentation. But anyways, still looking out at Jackson, some of the most wind advisories they've ever seen at this point in the year and across the year at that. So extremely windy year. Going to ag impacts. Again, it's been extremely warm to start 2023. This is a look at growing degree day accumulations. The class is probably looking at this now because we're going to have a quiz over this right after this webinar. But in growing degree days, it's a way to relate temperature to the development of a particular crop or pest across the bluegrass state. Whenever you see these lines increase, it's warmer outside, warmer than the base temperature required for growth or development of a particular crop or pest. Just for example, the base temperature for development for corn is 50 degrees. So if our average temperature for the day is 52 degrees, we subtract 52 and that 50, and we accumulate 2 growing degree days on the day. So on this map, we're accumulating from January 1st out to the end of April, or actually start of April, between the years of 2017 and 2023. 2023 is there in black. This goes along with what I told you earlier about the top 10 warmest years on record. 2017 was right there with 2023, January and February. So we're running pretty close to the growing degree day accumulations. What I want to point out, this is base 50, a base temperature of 50 for growing degree day accumulations. This line levels off in the middle of March. So at that time, it was cold outside. That was our cold air event here in the state of Kentucky for a week or two, and we weren't accumulating hardly any growing degree days with a base temperature of 50 degrees. Now, was that impactful to ag? Yes and no. Looking at winter wheat, you look at the various growth stages up there in the upper right, and most of Kentucky was in the jointing stage, which I believe off the top of my head is Feeks 5 and 6. But the temperature required for injury, according to this table, is 24 degrees for 2 hours or more. I will say Dr. Carrie Knott and her folks, she's one of the specialists out in Western Kentucky for small grains. They're doing some research in this subject moving forward, and looking a little bit more into maybe how relative humidity can impact damage, how soil temperatures, you name it. Luckily, even though the temperature required for injury is 24 degrees, you can see over on the left, she was in Hardin and LaRue counties scouting for wheat damage, and they saw essentially no damage to those developing heads. So that's extremely good news. This was the same case back in 2017. I'm not saying we didn't see any damage across the state. I'm waiting for some more impact reports to come in. But looking at the temperatures during that time period over that week, again, 320 to 321 was the first day of spring. But these are several counties across the state. I just went by alphabetical order according to what Carrie and Connor put in their article there below. But most of the state dropped into the teens or the 20s, well below that 24 degree threshold at times. This was the duration of temps in hours below that 24 degree threshold. And you see those numbers are pretty high. It's something we don't want to see. Now, before I go any further, again, winter wheat, we haven't seen a ton of damage right now. I've gotten some questions here recently. Why were we not seeing frost advisories or freeze warnings during this event? I work with the National Weather Service during the spring and fall seasons. We don't want to issue frost advisories or freeze warnings unless agriculture is susceptible and we can take mitigation measures. So for things like winter wheat, even though they could have been susceptible at the time, there's nothing we can do about it. We aren't covering hundreds of acres of fields. Fruit trees were susceptible at the time, but there's not a whole lot we can do about fruit trees. I have talked to some of the fruit specialists. There's something called frost dragons that can warm up some of those orchards using propane, but there's not very many orchards that have frost dragons out there. So we decide to not issue frost advisories or freeze warnings for this event because there wasn't a whole lot we could do. There wasn't a whole lot of vegetation susceptible at the time that we really needed to protect. Yes, strawberries were out there, plasticulture strawberries on some of these commercial operations, but most of your homegrown strawberries or matted row strawberries were not at a point to where they needed to be protected. So moving on, there was some damage to fruit trees across the state. I was talking to the fruit specialist over in Western Kentucky, Daniel Becker. I'm not sure if he's on today. No, it doesn't look like it. But it sounds like apples are going to come through it all right. The main impact was peach trees. Unfortunately, they took a big hit with that December Arctic event back in right there before Christmas, and anyways, they started going into bloom. They're in late February, going into early March. And this is a look at the temperatures required for bud kill of these particular trees here. And whenever peaches go into bloom, they're looking at only 10% bud kill if it goes down 27, but 90% kill if it goes down to 24. And as you guys are well aware from the previous slide, we went well below that 24 degrees. So peaches took a huge hit in 2023. Now, moving forward in agriculture, yes, this is from the crop report up here at the top. There's some corn in the ground, only 2% of Kentucky corn planted, only 1% of soybeans planted. That's expected for this time of year. But based on the forecast moving forward, I imagine that's going to be jumping in a large way here pretty soon. Livestock, pasture, wheat condition, all looking pretty good right now, all mostly in that fair to good category, some in that excellent, what we definitely want to see. That picture over on the right is from one of the professors here in my department of biosystems and ag engineering. He has a cattle operation in Mercer County. He put some fertilizer on this particular pasture, and it's looking pretty good. So guys will be continuing to put out fertilizer the next month or so, and thinking about that first cutting as we get into the second week of May. So luckily, talking to them, I don't believe prices are like they were last year at this time once the conflict in Ukraine started. So moving forward, something else I wanted to point out, whenever we're thinking about planting corn, beans, you name it, we're really targeting soil temperatures in the low to mid 60s. So that allows for germination, emergence in about 10 days time. And this is a look at soil temperatures over there at Union County. You're planting at 1 to 2 inch depth, somewhere in between there. This is a look at 2-inch soil temperatures in the light gray. And yes, they were cool there in the middle of in March, hovering up and down throughout the 50s. But here over this past week, they've seen a jump. But based on the forecast, I'll show you guys here in a second. Expect those soil temperatures to really consistently be jumping in the 60s in the not too near or in the near future, I should say. These are a look at the soil temperatures across the nation based on the March 26th to April 1st time frame. And yes, we're targeting that dark green and tan area down there that's currently across Tennessee and northern Mississippi, Alabama, you name it. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, those will be pushing north. I think Dr. Brodsky included this last month, but again, we're not completely out of the woods right now in terms of our last spring freeze. This is the average date that various locations see their last freeze in the state of Kentucky, across the state, mid to late April for probably the latest locations on this map. So just an FYI, the next 2 weeks does look warm. We'll see what the end of April looks like here in a week or two based on the outlooks. But if you're thinking about warm season vegetables, let's wait a little bit longer. So look at the next 7 days, the forecast. Again, we're finally getting a break from this wet pattern we've been in this past month, this severe pattern we've been in this past month. Most of the Ohio Valley is going to be ultimately pretty dry. I know the accumulations on this map are most likely the accumulations happening today. So not much rainfall expected across the state, especially out there in western Kentucky, where and central Kentucky, where most of our row crops are going to be going in the ground. So we have plenty of moisture. next week is looking fairly dry. So it may be about that time you're really going to be starting to hit those fields. I will say with our wetter climate in place, I've been telling farmers and producers, take those opportunities when you get them, because you just don't know. You see down there in Mississippi, Alabama, they're probably going to be out of the fields for a while based on this rainfall forecast. Going out 6 to 10 days. 6 to 10 day outlook here. Again, the darker the shades, the higher the confidence from the forecasters at the Climate Prediction Center. There is very, very high confidence we're going to see above normal temperatures in that April 11th to 15th time frame, not only here in Kentucky, but across the entirety of the eastern half of the United States. We're actually looking at pretty high confidence in a below normal precipitation also. Going out 8 to 14 days, this now goes out through April 19th. Again, above normal temperatures sticking around, and we're in that near to below normal precipitation outlook over there on the right. Now, above normal temperatures, I want to point out, what would be above normal for this time of year? Near normal high temperatures for April 13th through the 19th, the middle of April, we're typically running in the mid 60s to low 70s from north to south across the state of Kentucky. Normal lows in the low to mid 40s. So yes, we're probably going to see some days in the 80s as we move forward. I know we hit 90 yesterday, but that's going to be hard to come by in April. Monthly temperature outlook for the entirety of April. This was updated the last day of March, last Friday. Above normal temperatures favored. Again, we're looking the next 2 weeks, so this will most likely verify. Monthly precipitation outlook above normal. Ultimately. Now, this says something to me. Yes, we've seen some decent rainfall to start the month of April, but the next 2 weeks are showing near to below normal precipitation. So we'll see how this shapes out as we head through the rest of April. Seasonal temperature outlook, April through June, favoring above normal temperatures and above normal precipitation. Now, as I always tell folks, I take these with a grain of salt, because yes, favoring above normal temperatures and above normal precipitation over that 3-month period. That's not to say we're not going to have our fair shares of ups and downs. We will see some dry periods here and there. We'll see some wet periods here and there. We'll see some warmer conditions, some cooler conditions. So, but ultimately, if we're above normal at the end of June over this 3-month period, this map will verify over on the left. If we're above normal precipitation at the end of June over this 3-month period, we'll verify over on the right. So, but we will have our ups and downs. Looking a little farther out, this is a look at the El Nino Southern Oscillation. We are done with La Nina, and La Nina has been in place for 3 years. Now we're seeing those probabilities change as we head into the fall season, winter next year. You see those red bars are on the increase. That means a higher likelihood of El Nino type conditions. Now, over on the right, El Nino during the winter months usually means drier conditions for us. And that's a strong El Nino. Weaker El Ninos seems like go either way. But in a strong El Nino, we typically see drier conditions here in the Ohio Valley during the winter months. What I'll also say down here on the bottom, El Nino usually means less hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean. So we have stronger vertical wind shear that can rip these hurricanes apart. So something to watch as we go into the fall and winter seasons. It's been a while since we've seen El Nino here in the state of Kentucky, but we'll see how this shapes up. We're still quite a ways out. Lastly, monthly stream flow outlook looking pretty solid across the state for April 2023, running near to above normal in terms of stream flows. Look at the U.S. seasonal drought outlook, not looking at any drought conditions developing across the Ohio Valley. So this goes out through the end of June. So this tells me early planting season this year looking pretty solid. So no worries at the time being in terms of drought. Now that's not to say we can't get into June, go 2 weeks without rainfall, knock on wood. Hopefully it doesn't happen and we start seeing some drought conditions. But at this point in time, we're looking great. Looking at the significant wildland fire potential outlook, looking solid in Kentucky. Over there to our west, above normal risks in the Virginia, Maryland area, going down there to the mid-Atlantic coast and into Florida, but here in Kentucky, looking solid. So that's where I'm going to close it up. Again, we're starting 2023 with 3 straight months of near to above normal temperatures and precipitation. So it's been a wet start to the year. It's been a warm start to the year, even though we've had some our fair share of cold air events in March. Drought looks to be like a non-factor starting the 2023 growing season. Just again, next couple weeks are shaping up pretty good if you're looking to get some row crops in the ground. So get that machinery ready to go if it's not already. We are getting a break from the severe weather at this time too. And looking out the next month, drier conditions above normal temperatures. So looks like a warmer April moving forward. Our next scheduled webinar, May the 4th, next month, same time. And with that, I'm going to open up to questions. So I see Steve said boiler up 79. So I'm hoping we look better next year, Steve.
Matt, this isn't a Kentucky item, but something to keep an eye on over the next month or two will be the melting snows out west, particularly California, because so many areas out there have record snow depths now and record snow totals for the year. Some areas over 250% of their average, and so it'll be interesting to see how rapidly some of that melts. I mean, if they're cool, looking at your outlooks there, they're forecast to have cool temperatures, which is good as long as that still allows some melting to occur. If those cool temperatures kind of keep things as they are later into the spring, that could mean a pretty rapid melt once things do warm up. So that wouldn't be good.
Yeah, we definitely don't want any of these flooding scenarios as we move on into April, May, and June. So that's definitely a good point. So Chip said, as we saw last year, we are somewhat dependent on tropical systems bring us rain in the late summer and fall. Yes, I will, to add on to that. I saw a webinar here recently and I thought it was really interesting. And so the lower Mississippi River, the flow for that river is fed 60% by the Ohio Valley River Basin, and the rest of that 40% comes from the Missouri River and Upper Mississippi River Valley Basin. And last year was like a perfect storm, soil moisture. Both those regions were in drought. The Missouri and Upper Mississippi Valley regions, they were in a long-lived drought going back to 2021 and I believe 2020 in some instances. But taking both of those into account, but something else, I mean, we didn't have any of those tropical systems come up into Kentucky last year. So they all more or less went off into the Atlantic. And you definitely never want to see the impacts down there in the Gulf of Mexico, but they can save Kentucky ag sometimes up here in the state of Kentucky. So I know it saved soybeans back in 2012. Shane, Bowling Green set a new all-time lowest pressure reading on March 3rd, 980.7 millibars. So yeah, there's another one. That was quite the event. It's going to be hard to forget that one. So anybody else?
Matt, maybe you recall the numbers here, but from what I understand, we've had quite a few wet springs the last 5 to 10 years, and even a week of no rain, coming up, it just seems like such a gift compared to a lot of what we've seen the last few seasons.
Yeah, definitely a gift. As I was saying, we're definitely, we've been in a wetter climate the past decade, and I've been given quite a few presentations to farmers and producers, and it's, again, like you're saying, take the opportunity when you get it, because you don't know when you'll see another window like that. I'm telling the same thing to my friends that are going to be cutting hay as we go into May, June. You don't know when you're going to get those 4 or 5 day dry windows anymore. So again, take advantage whenever you get those windows. So
It's a little disheartening seeing that seasonal spring forecast for above normal precip because, once again, it's like, oh no, another wet spring. But
yeah,
but those things are known to be wrong.
yeah.
Any other questions, anyone? Comments?
And Shane also said in the chat box, on the subject of wet springs, Bowling Green set a new record daily rainfall on March 24th of 1.98 inches. So
Great. Well, thank you, Matt. And as you said in the beginning, I think our next webinar is May 6th, May 4th. No, May 4th.
May 4th. Yeah.
That's right. All right. The Star Wars will help me remember that. So yeah, before the Derby.
Before the Derby. But if that's what if no one else has any questions, I'll hang it up for today.
All right. Well, great. Well, thanks so much, Matt. And thank you everyone for joining. And we'll talk to everyone next month.
See you guys.
Thank you all.